Welcome to a special episode of Dripping Creativity Podcast. I am your host, Chris Corvan, and I am honored and excited to be here with these talented and amazing writers. Today, we're diving headfirst into the enchanting world of romance writing. Whether you're a hopeless romantic or simply intrigued by the intricacies of human connection, this episode is for you. We'll be delving into the arts and crafts of compelling love stories, exploring the nuances of different romance subgenres, and uncovering some secrets that you may not have known. So sit back and relax and prepare to fall in love with the magic of romance writing. How are we all doing today?
Good.
Really good.
Excellent. So I think just to start this off, we're going to go around the table here, and you can introduce yourself, give a little brief history on what you're doing and what type of romance you enjoy writing with. Let's start with Sara Burton.
Hi. Sorry. Now I'm nervous. Okay, so I am a literary romance author. My debut novel is coming out in 21 days. I just counted. I'm nervous as fuck. Am I allowed to swear here?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Sorry. I'm sweating. I'm pitting out a little bit. But yeah, that's what I'm working on. I have other stuff that we're working on too, but just focusing in right now on getting that first book out.
Well, I'm Sara Elisabeth. My debut dark romance came out in January. And that's what I tend to write. I like to write dark romance. I'm working on the second book. It's a character series. I'm working on the second book right now. Yeah, I guess that's all I've got.
And I'm Ciara Hartford. I usually write romantic, high fantasy and romantasy. And my debut just came out April 9th.
Thank you all for being here. This is wonderful. It's actually Sara Burton here who managed to put this all together. So big thanks to her. Let's start with, what was the moment you realized you wanted to become a romance writer?
Oh man, that's a hard one.
I mean, I always wanted to be a fantasy writer. Like, I've been wanting to write fantasy since I was a little kid. But I didn't really get into romance until 2020 when I just started reading a whole lot as an adult. Like before that, I read for school or I read for work, and I just wasn't reading as much as I used to. So I guess my obsession with romance came kind of late in life, but I'm not sad that I'm part of the community now, for sure.
Yeah, I think mine was probably a similar timeline. I mean, I've been reading and writing fantasy for years, and it wasn't until like 2019, 2020 when there was a little more time to sit and read a lot. And I picked back up some of my older manuscripts and rewrote, because now that I'm older, The Hobbit is just not quite where it's at anymore. I need a little bit of that tension, a little bit of that, I don't know. As an adult woman, I need a little bit more, right?
Yeah,
Angst.
exactly.
That's good.
If it doesn't hurt, it's not good romance. Man.
Right. I needed to spice it up a little bit. So I like taking what I loved as a teenager, moving into adulthood, and just inject a little bit more of that angst and tension. So.
Well, I guess I'm like the dirty freak over here, because I knew I wanted to write romance since I was like 14. I was at my grandma's house and like there was no power, and I found a Sandra Brown book. It was Riley in the Morning, and I like went up with my little flashlight and I finished it like overnight. I was like, and then that was it, man. I was like, yep, I want to do that. So
yeah, I feel like I'm really new to the romance genre. I don't know. I really didn't start reading it until probably 2 years ago, when I was like, wait a minute, this is more the direction that I'm going. I want to find more of what I am writing instead of reading Brandon Sanderson. And no offense to Brandon Sanderson, but like I needed a little more Sarah J. Maas. Like that's more the direction I was going. So I started picking up some of that.
It's funny you say that, because like when I was a kid and I read fantasy, I read a lot of Terry Brooks and Raymond Feist, and just
Yes.
like a lot of like epic, kind of people would say Tolkien ripoffs, I guess, you know, epic fantasy. But I always was like focused on the relationship between the characters, and like I was shipping them even back then. Or like when I read David Eddings, like even though it was from the perspective of like a teenage boy, he was still trying to get together with the girl, and so. No, that's. I guess like I'd always kind of. That was liked it. I just didn't realize I liked it.
Yeah, David Eddings was that was my first foray into fantasy. Was David Eddings, and I just remember being like, "Where's it gonna go? Like, where's the relationship gonna go?" That part was always so. Same with Eragon. I don't know if you've read the Eragon series. There wasn't quite enough in that either for me. Just like.
Well, I tried to read them as adults, and I was like. Where's the sex? Like we need like it's not dirty enough. But then at the same time you're like, and they're also not old enough. So
exactly.
It's like I need adult romance injected in everything now.
So then as we're talking about different authors and all of that stuff, let's talk about your guilty pleasure books. What type of genres and stuff that, you know, you may not openly go, I loved this so much, but you just can't help but read.
Oh man.
I mean, Rena Kent's pretty dark. I like a lot of Rena Kent books. She writes, there's like some primal stuff in it, and there's like, you know, exhibitionism and different, I don't even know what some of the stuff is called, but because I don't normally dig into things that go that dark. My books, I always say, are kind of like dark gray compared to books like hers, but I'm always surprised that I like something that's that dark, but I don't know. My favorite is generally I prefer male romances to male female half of the time, because I feel like there's way more angst. Like I know that's weird because everyone's like, oh yeah, women are like dramatic, but I'm like, oh no, like the two guys together, like they're way more dramatic.
I might need some recommendations, because that's definitely something that I haven't really. Like, I don't know where to start.
Yeah, my third book will be male, so.
Good. That's where I'll start then. There you go.
That might be where I know. I have plenty, like, I have so many people I could recommend, so.
Because I think my guilty pleasure would just be like something like Sarah J. Maas. Like, I want to say that was probably my first foray into romantasy, which seems ridiculous, but like I was like, okay, all right, this is not what I was thinking it was. I picked up something years ago. I don't even remember what it was called or who wrote it, and it was so violent. And I was like, no, back up. That's not that. And I was like 20 years younger, and it wasn't. So then I avoided it for so long. And now, like within the last couple of years, you can tell what I was writing, or when I was reading Sarah J. Maas from what I was writing, because it definitely influenced parts of my own writing. So
I feel like, because I just read a lot of romance. I read a lot of like lit fic. Honestly, my guilty pleasure is probably like going back and reading like my Goosebumps. Because it's like, who reads those? But I'm like, ooh, like this is, and I just like, I don't know, it's just all the feels of being like younger, or like the Boxcar Kids, like I don't know, just like those books that I read when I was younger, and I go back and I'm like, this is why I wanted to write. Like these are books that were like, ooh, this is really good, and it kept me like turning the pages, and I just like ate them all up. And it's stuff like that. That's like, people are like, why are you reading a kid's book? I'm like, because it's fucking epic. Like, everybody read these books when they were kids.
Like, hands down, The Outsiders is one of my favorite books. And it's by a 15-year-old, and it's about 15-year-olds. And, like, it's not, I mean, there's not romance in it, but there certainly is bromance, and I'll take it. Like, I think bromance is awesome. So,
yes.
One kind of final icebreaker here to get everything going. What is your ideal environment for writing? Are you a cafe person? Are you a at home somewhere? Are you just wherever you happen to be? What is your ideal place?
I actually think I get the most done in a coffee shop because I'm less distracted by what's going on at home. I have a 7-year-old son, and he's asking me for snacks while I'm writing smut. It's not the same. So So I mean, if I am at home, I like to write on, and it's nice out, I like to write on our balcony because it tends to be quieter, and like my cats will come out and sit with me, and everyone will just come and leave me alone. So that's, if it's raining, I'm just screwed. I just have to write in the kitchen or wherever. I don't even have an office because my husband works at home, so he gets the office because, you know, he makes way more money than me. So.
It's very familiar.
Yeah.
And that was me last night. I was sitting on my patio. We just got an egg chair, and I was like, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, I just made a
there, right?
patio furniture too, because I was like, if I'm going to sit outside this year, like I wanted to see.
Yeah, I think for me, we have a den, like we have a split level. So it's like the main floor, and then you go down like 7 steps, and it's our den, and it's dark and it's cold. So I can always have a blanket. Because I like to be in my big leather chair with just like so ghetto, a pillow and then my laptop on top of the pillow, and I just sit there, or my iPad or whatever, in the dark with my water and instrumental music, and that's it. It's so weird.
That's very mood setting though. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then let's start diving into the industry itself here and move on to segment 2. Self-publishing versus traditional publishing. It's one of the biggest debates. You see it absolutely everywhere. Both paths have their pros and cons, but where do you start with this? Sara Elisabeth, let's start with you.
I mean, the dream from the time that I graduated college was traditional publishing, but I'm like a young Gen Xer or a elder millennial, whatever you want to call me. And back when I graduated college, it was pretty difficult to get in there. Like, you were mailing manuscripts, and like I was like, I just don't have the thick enough skin to get 200 rejections before anything is accepted. So I didn't even try. So for me, self-publishing was like a way to do that without the stress. It's very stressful to be a self-published author, but it's a different kind of stress. It's like stress I can manage versus like how many people are going to reject, you know, my writing before it's accepted. So for me, I like having the freedom over it. I like having, being able to write what I want to, and pick and choose my editor's comments that I want to use and not want to use, and not have anyone tell me, you know, well, you can't do this because it's not popular, you can't do that. And I, you know, obviously I don't have any experience with traditional publishing per se now, other than, you know, the industry I used to work in before my son was born, which was mostly copy editing. I was an editor, I wasn't a writer. So I mean, I'm happy on the self-publishing route. I don't think that I will even try for traditional, but I guess you never know.
Yeah, I think I'd be on the same level. Like, it seems so impossible. We might be about the same age because
I'm 43.
I too. yeah, exactly the same age.
Okay, so yeah.
Because I would call myself an elder millennial.
Yeah.
And it was just it was too far out. It was way too far out. And then I didn't really know what I was doing when I wrote this first book. So then when I was like, I'm going to get it published, it was daunting. And I was like, I don't think I have thick enough skin, even as a graphic designer in my day job. So I'm used to taking criticism all day long about what I'm doing, you know, that it's crap. I didn't think I had thick enough skin. Plus, I'm a graphic designer. So I wanted to do all the cover art and the design on the inside. And I wanted to do that. And then I learned, if you traditionally publish, you don't necessarily get to do that or have as much say over how it's done. So then I was like, I'm just going to learn how to do this myself.
And she's learned a lot, and she's super helpful. So
yeah, that's true.
If
you want any weird random information, just ask, and I will. If I don't know, a lot of times I know who knows. So,
which is great. And that right there, I think, is part of why I love. Well, like you both said, it's stressful. Like, it's stressful as shit. But I love the self-publishing world that I've like kind of just found all of a sudden, because we help each other and you can like learn from each other. And as both of you guys said, I mean, I have a really good friend of mine, Beth, who's like querying right now, and just the process, like learning it through her. Oh my God. And then the thing that I think we all forget is somebody picks you up and you get an agent.
Yep.
I know somebody from Threads. It took her 13 years to actually get her book picked up. And I'm like, I'm waiting 13 years. Like,
I'll be down with that.
I can't. I don't have the patience.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
so
and maybe being picked up after the fact is fine. I know like some hybrid authors on Threads that have done well. They've got a decent backlog, and half of them are traditional and half of them are, self-published, and maybe that's the way I'll end up going. But for now, this is what works. So.
Yeah, I think in the similar vein, I might, if at some point I think I'm writing something that's going to be marketable too. Like I didn't write a YA romantasy for this first book. Like it's definitely adult, high fantasy. The romance is more of a subplot in the first book. The second book, it gets a little more. No spoilers though. I'm not giving away any spoilers. I'm looking at you, Burton. I'm looking at you. No. But I was like, this isn't even going to be something that someone's going to want. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's really, that push for YA is so strong in traditional publishing right now.
Sure.
Plus, and I'm not saying anything negative about this, but there's such a big push for BIPOC authors right now too, and I am not. So then I want to stay out of the way for the people that would really be able to bring what traditional publishers are wanting right now.
So that actually kind of goes well into the next question, which is representation and diversity have become an increasingly important topic in the world of literature. How do you approach that within your writing itself, both in terms of characters and themes, and do you feel a responsibility to make sure that you are having a diverse range of experiences and identities in your work?
It's a slippery slope for sure. And obviously I think we all want to have that representation in our books. I think it's a little bit easier being part of the queer community to include, queer rep in my books. But I also have friends who are, different races, different backgrounds, who are going to be sensitivity readers for my next book, because I plan on it taking place in Vancouver, which has a huge Indian population and it has a huge Asian population. So I'd like to actually accurately represent that without, putting my foot in my proverbial mouth. So, I think that's important for sure.
As a native, I say thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, Sarah, I don't even think we've really talked, but you're like saying things. I'm like, okay. And Chris knows, because my MFM that I'm working on takes place in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And there's same thing, like a lot of native, so I was like, okay, I'm going to look into this, and I'm going to start researching and making sure that I'm, handling it in the right way and all of that. So yeah, but I definitely want there to be that representation there as well. I know we've talked about it a little bit, because just more, and it's more to do with race and ethnicity. And my first book takes place in a town based off of where I grew up, and there was not diversity where I grew up. It's a very small town. It's very white. So my first book isn't as diverse in that sense, and I'm like, I definitely will get there. My second book to my first series has a lot of representation, all across the board, and I'm like, okay, everybody just bear with me, because it's coming. It's there. It's just that first book, which really, again, it was kind of just getting my foot in the door of the writing world. So
yeah, I was kind of doing what I knew. I wrote a lot about what I knew for the first one, and that but yeah, I agree. That was some of the feedback that I got from some of my friends with different backgrounds, or even some Native American friends that I have, and I was like, yeah, don't worry, it's coming. I just haven't got there yet. But similar to you, when I grew up, I grew up in a town in the Pacific Northwest, but there wasn't a lot. Now there's a much larger swath of ethnicity here than there was when I was, growing up in the 80s and the 90s. So
I cheated. They're just not even human, so it doesn't even
Yeah, well, that's fair.
So, but I mean, I think that there's super importance that needs to be placed on sensitivity readers, though, for sure. Like even though I didn't necessarily have like real races in my books, I still have a character that I mean, he comes across as gay. I don't ever say, hey, he's gay. I don't ever say that. But at the same time, I brought in a sensitivity reader, and I'm like, please just tell me if there's anything offensive, because I don't want him to be alienating someone in this world, when really it's just that like the gender is not necessarily something that's as important in fantasy, I think, as in other, like in books that take place in our world. But I still think that there's importance, even if you don't think you have anything at all, to definitely still have someone who has experience in making sure that particular groups are being represented properly.
For sure, yeah. And my first book has a bisexual character and a gay character, and then it kind of comes out in my second book that one of the characters was also a lesbian. And so I know there's not a lot of female representation out there right now, and people are looking for more sapphic romance. So I'm trying to include that more in my next book for sure. Like, I think sapphic romance is awesome. So, so I want to make sure that even within like the queer community, that I'm representing like a decent amount of people in a positive way, in a sensitive way.
That's the important thing, is that positive, and not having like a villain that takes on some of, like, I hate when people do that.
We're talking like Pretty Little Liars here.
Yeah, where I'm like,
Pretty Little Liars that did that. They were like, it was like a trans character was the villain.
Yeah.
I was like, come on, guys, like.
Like, I get that if that's the character, but if that's the only character in the whole thing, I don't know.
No, at this point, I feel like the villain should be not, as long as it's not a bear, like, right? So
right. Yes.
So topical. God. That was so topical.
My villain's a white male with it's not a bear. So
nicely done. I like that.
Wow.
Man, watching that Discord on Threads is just insane.
It's hard.
Holy shit.
It's
like,
really hard on TikTok too. Don't go over there.
Oh no, I don't even have like an author presence on TikTok because I'm too old. So
I'm too old too.
Over there, but
we're the same age.
Well, to be fair, you're probably a more responsible author than I am, because I should be on TikTok. I'm just
That's true. I might be. I don't know. I can't speak to everyone. No, I just try to avoid it. Like I post just enough and then I run away.
Right. Yeah. I have the account. I just have never put anything on it. So.
It's probably good.
All right. So then moving on, let's talk about stereotypes and stigma. Romance literature has often been unfairly stigmatized and pigeonholed by a lot of things. How do you navigate around the stereotypes and challenges associated with the genre? Have you ever faced criticism or judgment when you're writing from anything that you decided I'm going to run with this idea anyways, even though it is kind of stereotypical?
I mean, honestly, I think romance stereotypes are kind of awesome, like, for the most part. Like, all the tropes that we use, like, yeah, everyone's seen enemies to lovers. Everyone loves enemies to lovers. So what? It's awesome. Like, why not use it?
Yes.
So I have a hard time, like, avoiding, like, if I like the stereotype, I'm probably going to use it. And I think that people who judge romance based on that are a little bit small-minded about it, because, I mean, there's nothing wrong with, what we're writing. Like, we're pretty much like the whole backbone of the book world at this point. Like, my back hurts from holding up, all the other genres that are trying to make it out there. And I think that most of the stereotypes are unfounded in romance, and that they probably and people should probably be a bit more open-minded about it.
I think it's definitely, I don't even know if stereotype is really,
I guess it's not even the right word, like,
Yeah. Well, and I feel like this might be too dark. I feel like it's people's own shame coming out.
No, totally.
In a way that's, because like I was saying, I'm fairly new to reading and writing romance, and I feel like part of that was my own shame in the way I was brought up and thinking about sex and how the role of sex should be in a relationship and in your life and as a woman and all these weird things. And I feel like in this day and age, we're breaking out of those so much, and romance is helping a lot of people feel more comfortable about themselves, about maybe their fetishes, all of these things, because we're human beings, and just like everything else, we're all existing on a spectrum. And it's like, for the first time ever, we have this huge spectrum of literature of different people being represented, different fetishes, different ideas. So I don't know. I think romance is amazing.
I think it is too. And like the criticism that I have gotten, unfortunately, it's been from, like, I spent 10 years I'm from Washington State, but I spent 10 years living in the South. And I have friends who I've known since college, and they have essentially defriended me just because of what I write. So, I mean, there's still that stigma out there. And I almost feel like we have a cause at this point. Like, there's nothing to be ashamed of. Like, it's sexuality. Like, everyone has it, everyone's part of it. Like, I don't know, it sucks that I'm not friends with those people anymore, but at the same time, like, I feel like I'm helping other people who, you know, are new to it and did go through some sort of traumatic thing with it in the 80s and 90s, when your parents were like, oh no, don't watch Red Shoe Diaries. We were talking, Sarah and I were just talking about this, Red Shoe Diaries in the middle of the night on Showtime. Oh no. Like,
oh man,
I absolutely loved that show.
Cinemax, whatever it was. Like, we're staying up till like midnight watching.
I'm like rapidly Googling,
and it's like softcore.
I'm like, what
porn.
is this?
It's not even the good stuff.
It's very very soft. But I was saying, so I have this like crazy idea in my head, like, you know, everybody's doing indie spotlights, and I'm like, I want to do an indie spotlight, but I want it to be like a Sara indie spotlight, and I'm gonna like release it probably like late, like midnight. And I was telling her, I'm like, you know, when Cinemax used to turn to Skinemax, and it's gonna be like that. And I'm gonna interview everybody, and at the end of the interview, there's gonna be like one really naughty question that you have to answer.
Almost like a truth or dare, but your dare is so terrible that you have to answer.
Yes.
100%. Yeah.
I like it.
So, going off of that one, let's talk about the different subgenres of romance. Let's start with talking about your specific one that you write in, and then let's talk about ones that maybe you want to dive into or don't understand, because there's a lot of subgenres here.
I feel like they can all be, anything can be a romance, first of all. Like, that's, and I feel like we need to get to that place. But for me, it's romantasy or romantic fantasy, which are two different things, by the way. I don't know if you guys are in on that.
I've heard that they're two different things, but it's so I don't write or read much.
So romantic fantasy means you can take the romance out and the book would still stand. So in the case of my book, like, it's like a Romeo and Juliet retelling. You could take that Romeo and Juliet kind of almost insta-lovey thing out, and it would still be a fantasy book and stand on its own. Romantasy is a romance that's wrapped in a fantasy world. So you can't take the romance out of that at all. It will not stand on its own at all. Mm-hmm. And I kind of waffle between the two. I'm like borderline between the two. Like because I know Burton has mentioned that it's romantasy, and I'm like, it doesn't have all of the stuff that people expect from a romantasy. Like, well, that would be a spoiler. I can't say, but no HEA in the first book. But, you know, there's certain things that people expect, and that's not necessarily in there because it would be the first book anyway, more to the romantic fantasy side of things. But then you get into fantasy romance. I don't necessarily understand the difference between fantasy romance and romantasy. To me, those are the same things. I don't know. But those are my genres.
I mean,
I want to do cozy romantasy, but that's like a whole different, I don't know.
I mean, I write, I don't know if I'll step out of dark romance or not. I've always wanted to write romantasy because of my love of fantasy as a kid, but I have this fear of world building that I like to build, or I don't mind world building if it's within the world I already know, but making up an entirely new one just sounds really intimidating. So it's something that's on my plate for later. But, you know, as far as dark romance goes, like I mentioned before, I kind of consider my dark romance to be kind of charcoal gray. Like it's not the darkest you're going to read. It's about like middle of the line. And, you know, it can go dark. And most of the time, you know, you want to check the trigger warnings. You want to make sure that whatever you're about to read isn't, you know, going to traumatize you and, you know, instigate a panic attack, whatever. But I mean, they can include things like sexual assault and rape and, you know, stalking and alcohol and drug abuse and all that sort of thing. And that's kind of what makes it dark, like to the point where it can be like, oh, it's mafia. So people are like being beheaded and there's blood play and murder and like all kinds of stuff. Or it can be, you know, I say on the lighter side, but the lighter side is like, oh, that guy's stalking her and then he tried to rape her like that. And that's not very light. So, and there tends to be like, at least in my books, there's a lot of generational trauma, a lot of problems with, you know, how parents were raising their kids and what the effect that had on them. Because I think that a lot of people from my generation have gone through that. So it was something that was important for me to write. But there's such a range. Like it's like it can be so dark that you are uncomfortable reading it to something that's kind of like an episode of the OC. So
you need to come to the dark romantasy side then, because I'm probably like borderline with some of my stuff. Not this series, Burton. I know you're like looking, you're like, well, I don't think so. I have another one that's like hiding, waiting for me to be a better writer. And it is so like, it's touching on all kind like slavery and rape and all kinds of stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know where this fits or how it fits or like where you're going. So, but yeah, if you ever let me know about world building, I'll help you out.
Well, there we go.
There's tricks. I can
help you with like the dark side. You can help me with the world building.
I like this.
Me. So like the other Sarah side, world building outside of our world, fucking terrifying, man. And I won't do it. Like I won't. And it's funny because I was like, I'm not really a fantasy reader, and that's bullshit. Like I read a lot of fantasy when I was a kid. Like I don't know where in my mind I thought that happened. However, I got really bored, and how Ciara mentioned earlier, like just things are kind of, I don't know. And then I read her book, and I was
like, you gotta find the right one in the genre.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And it got me back into being like, oh no, I can read fantasy again. Like I really enjoy this. And you're right, you do kind of cross that line of like, but like you said, in terms of the whole, and I know I'm getting off track of what I write, but the what people are expecting, so that's where you fall in line. That's where I struggle hard. So we'll get into what I write, which is we've kind of decided like literary romance or literary fiction that has romantic elements, because there's a lot of that in there, but a lot of my stuff doesn't really fit with what people are looking for. Like when I had beta readers do, it's not the book that's out or coming out right now, but my next book that'll be out, a lot of people were like, I don't know where you put this. And I'm like, well,
I'm like
so,
finding
I don't know.
comps and stuff. Yeah.
Because it's it talks a lot. It goes really deep into mental health, and then there's magical realism. I don't even know if it's really that. That's what people have told me it's like the closest to. But yeah, and then if I were to venture into something, which I already started to because I have somebody here who's encouraging me, I'm kind of wandering into dark romance, so that'll be coming.
I feel like that just helps you explore the darker sides of things, which
it does. My search history has gone downhill for sure.
You have the van sitting out front.
I do. I'm like, what is the FBI out there? Because I just like, how many stab wounds before it kills someone? Like,
yeah.
All right, excellent. I think we covered a lot of that stuff. So we're going to move into segment 3 now, and we're going to talk more specific stuff related to individual writers, as you all are. First one we're going to talk about is kind of overcoming blocks and challenges within that. So a lot of the times, we all know what writer's blocks are. All of that fun stuff are the moments of doubt, creative burnout, things like that. Do you have evolving steps that you take to help overcome that? What's your process as best as you can?
Well, for me, the first book was easier than the second book has been. And that's because I've been writing the first book in my head for ages. And despite the fact that it's changed genres a couple of times, I knew the kind of characters I wanted. I knew the kind of story I wanted. I had scenes like written out in my brain, and I'm a pantser. So, and I also can't write out of order. Like, that's like one of my weird things. And so for that one, it was like, oh, well, I know where I want to get. How do I get there? And I just kind of let it happen. And I would take breaks, like mental health breaks generally, when my family was sick, or, just when I felt like I needed a break from doing it. But it was a much more streamlined process. The second book for me has been much harder because I have no idea where it's going. And I have scenes that I want to use and scenes that I've thought about, and I keep writing them down, but I feel like I can't get there because I can't write out of order. So I've been talking to Sara about them because that's actually what gets me unstuck, is talking to some of my other author friends, because they're like, oh, well, why don't you try this, or why don't you try that? And it kind of gets gets the energy back into it. And I feel like that's a way forward. Like, I pretty much need an outline in my head and then I can move forward. But sometimes I get stuck, and it's rough when I'm stuck like that, because I just want to keep going. I want to get to like the scene that I'm looking forward to writing, but how do I get there? I have no idea. So that's the hardest part for me, and I think that it's like my own limitation. And it's funny because I'm not a pantser for anything else in my life. I'm very organized, but I can't outline a story to save my life. So,
or I don't know if you're like me, you outline it and then you get part of the way in, and then you're just like, well, that isn't going to happen the way I outlined it at all. Yeah. Like, you try to be a plotter and it never happens that way. Yeah. I too am a pantser. I usually write in order, but with this second book that I'm working on, I have the first draft done. I'm going back through and rewriting some scenes because I wrote it before book one was completely finished. So there's some inconsistencies that need to be fixed. But I did skip around a little bit more with book two, and I will not be doing that with book three, because it is so much harder to go back and try, when you're a pantser anyway, to try and fit in those little pieces that you didn't want to write at the time. You still don't want to write them now. How are you going to... But for me, when I get to the point where I really just can't continue on what I'm actively working on, I'll either put that away and read, or I do a lot of illustration, painting, drawing, or I go to another plot. And so I have like 5 different plots going. But I know in my head, I'm like, this is just a really fun one. It may never see the light of day. It's just for me to work out some different things. And a lot of times reading actually gets me back into what I'm working on. But it's a combination of all these different things. As long as there's something else creative that you can move into, I think, and give yourself the grace to say, okay, I can't do this right now. I really can't. I need to step away, instead of forcing yourself to try to do it.
One of the things that really helps me too is I always read like the chapter, or at least the few paragraphs before that I wrote, like the day before or the week before, whenever I last wrote, and to get me back into the story. And I think that helps. And sometimes, like, if I'm not feeling like writing, I'll just reread like part of what I wrote and just make sure that it's going in the right direction. And then at least I feels like I did something productive with my time, even if I don't feel like I can get more words on the page. So that definitely helps too.
I do that a lot too. Where I'll just like reread stuff to make sure that we're going somewhere. But I'm also a pantser, and I story jump. So like you mentioned, you have like stuff working. I have 7 work in progresses right now.
Too many.
Trigger warning.
Oh yeah. And like Chris knows, so I don't write stuff down. And like, well, I was gonna say, Sarah's reading my book right now, and I wrote the entire, I don't know where you're at, I wrote the entire like middle-ish section first, and then I went back, but like I had like scenes from the beginning, I finished the ending, like I like filled it all in, like that's how I work, but it takes place over like 20 something years. So eventually I did get smart and I like made a timeline, because there's a lot of references in there, and I'm like, well, we're not dropping this song if this song wasn't out. Like there was like Cascadia's, every time we touch, I'm like, I need this for this book. And then I'm like, well, this party happens in April and that song came out in August of that year, so we ain't doing it because it's not perfect. But I jump a lot. Like if I get stuck on something I'm working on, I just go to the next story, and then I'll be writing like 3 or 4 things at a time. And
you got to start moving around from genre to genre. I feel like that
I was actually
helps.
so grateful for my editor, because I didn't even have a book Bible for my first book. So she made one as she was editing it, and then she sent it with her editing notes, and I was like, bless you, this will help me so much with the second book. And now I just on Sarah for my second book, because I can't read my first book again. I'm afraid I'm going to find some typos or something. So I'm like, is this consistent? Like, I don't remember.
Yeah, I feel bad because my editor sent me back like a book Bible, or she called it a style guide, and I was like, I should have sent you the one I had. It's like 10 pages of just crap. But when you're fantasy world building, you have to have like, what are your cities? What are your religions? What are all the crap that you may not ever even put it in the book, but you need it, because if someone's going to ever refer to it, like it needs to be there so that you can go back and be like, oh, how did this one stupid god spell his name? I don't even know. I need to go back and
Well, I mean, I need to do that now. Now I realize how important it is my second book. So I actually started with this one, because I'm like, wait, what color is Aya's again? Like, I'm literally created this character and I can't remember. So
I probably have it notated somewhere, so ask me. It's probably highlighted in my copy of the book.
I know everyone's eye color. I've read it several times.
Oh my God. No, I read it last night.
Okay.
But anyway.
Coming off of that one, let's move into a more serious topic when it comes to mental health, it being Mental Health Awareness Month. It's definitely something a lot of creatives deal with, regardless of writer, artist, and all of that stuff. When it comes to things like imposter syndrome and anxiety, what type of things do you find help that you would actually kind of offer as advice to people currently in it or not sure how to deal with it themselves?
Oh, that's hard.
Yeah,
it's too hard.
I mean, I think that, and especially when you're friends with a lot of authors and indie authors, you find yourself playing the comparison game whether you want to or not. So that can tank your mental health, or it can, or it can boost you up. Like, it could really do either, honestly, depending on what your mental state is at the time or what your book's doing at the time. Like, if your book's doing well and someone else's book is doing well, like, you can celebrate together. But, someone's selling 100 copies and you sold 2 this month, like, that feels crappy. But at least for me, it makes me feel better when I start feeling that little bit of jealousy or that little bit of, oh, why can't my book be as good or whatever. It just helps to be supportive of the other people. Because that in general, like whatever the love language thing is, like, I just like giving people gifts. Like, that's just my thing. And so I'm like, oh, what can I give this person that will make them feel better, and that makes me feel better. So that's one of the ways that I kind of deal with that. Cause I know, being an author is definitely about the comparison game, and I wish it wasn't. But sometimes it's like, we're all human. Like, we do it whether we want to or admit it or not. So that's just one way that I try and deal with it, so that I don't just spiral into, oh, I'm a crap writer and my books will never sell. And
I think that's the comparison thing is really hard. But I almost look at it because it's a natural instinct of being a human, right? Like, we're always comparing ourselves, other people. Like, even if you're like, oh, my boyfriend's so great, but he's 2 inches shorter than my last boy. That's still a comparison that you didn't even. But this is horrible. I'm confessing this right now. I go back, I pick my favorite author and I read their terrible reviews. And because like the bad one, like 1-star, 2-star reviews. And I say, if this person who I absolutely love, like absolutely love their writing, if someone can give them a 1-star and a 2-star review, then anybody can get a 1-star and a 2-star review. They're not perfect. They're not God. So then if I'm not perfect, then it's going to be okay. If I get a 2-star review or a 1-star review, it's going to be all right, because if they can get one, I can get one. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't always. I'm still usually like, can I please have a higher dose on my depression and anxiety medication?
Or Prozac.
It's funny that you said that, because I don't necessarily do that, but one of my favorite books, Normal People, which was made into a Hulu special, like if you go on Goodreads, I think the book is maybe like an average of 3.2, or I don't quote me on this, but it's not like, I ate that book up. I read it in a day and I was like, this is amazing and I love it. And I was actually told that one of my books she's like, I feel like you write like that. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, how is she doing? And I was like, oh, like she's kind of middle of the road, but like it made me feel like, okay, well, you don't have to be like, you don't have to have a 5-star overall rating. Like I think 3s are great. One of my first review ratings on my other book was a 3, and I was like, yeah, like better than a 1. So I just kind of try to like look at that. I'm like, even the people out there that are, like you said, like you love their book, but I think that's another thing I tell myself. I'm like, my book's not for everybody. Somebody out there is gonna hate it. That's gonna be fine, because you know what? I can't please everybody. So I kind of do that. And the other thing is, instead of like comparing, I will go through and I'll be like, what can I learn from this? Like, I've read both of your books and I was like, okay, like Ciara does really good at making me, I'm like, I can smell the moss on that damn tree. Like I am here. And then Sara, like there's like certain emotions and even just like touches and things where I'm like, ooh, I could do that better. I can definitely I can make sure that you really feel that embrace. Like I can do this better. So that's what I do, is I'm like, you know what? Take like inspiration from other people and then like let me perfect my stuff so that I can be like, you know what? I love both of like these 2 authors are fabulous and I can, get there.
Well, it's good getting inspiration from the world around you.
Really, as it should be.
Yes.
So going back to something we touched on at the very beginning and kind of touching on here, finding support within the community. It's such a valuable resource, and especially as I've seen on Threads there with the massive creator community and some of the most amazing people I have ever met. Literally right here in this call was all off of Threads. So it's very important to have such a community. With that, how do you feel? How would you explain to somebody who's very, no, I have to do this alone, why it's important to have a strong community?
Well, when I started was before Threads existed, and I wasn't on Twitter, and my Instagram was literally my personal Instagram. So I had nothing. Like I had friends and family who were like, yay, you're writing a book. And that was pretty much all that I had for social media. And I wrote about 70-80% of it before Threads was even around. And just the amount of support that I got since it's been around has turned around like my motivation to write like 110%. Like once I felt like I was screaming into the void before. I didn't have any author friends, didn't have any author community, and it just made it harder to know, like, what am I doing? Like, I've never published anything in my life. Who do I ask? And the community has been like such a godsend for like any sort of questions I have. Like someone always has experience, whether good or bad, to kind of head me in the right direction. And that feeling that I'm not trying to figure it all out on my own has been like, it's been 1,000 times better than it was before. So, and then just being able to carry like those contacts from Threads over onto Instagram to some extent, because I didn't have the Instagram following I needed. So it's been It's been awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I had a similar, I started writing before Threads, but like I wrote my whole first book completely in a void. Like I had no idea there was even a community on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter. I had my Facebook. My Instagram was my personal account. Like all these things are very much the same.
Yeah.
I finished a book and one of my friends that I've known my whole life is like, oh, my wife's working on a book. She's on Instagram and she's in groups on Facebook. And I was like, I didn't even know this was a thing. So I just started inserting myself in all the, just be like, hey, what's up? I'm here. And I just learned so much, and just finding people that were more than happy to give me answer any of my crazy questions, would read stuff and be like, oh, this is total crap. Or, oh, this is great. Work on this. Or have you ever heard of Save the Cat 3-act story structure? Which I was like, no. Like all of these things. And so I think Instagram, Threads, those are the two places where you can really find someone to answer a question if you have one, someone to bounce ideas off of. It's the middle of the night, you have no idea what you're still doing up, and there's someone on that is going to respond.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like it'll be the middle of the night and I'm like, well, let's see, who are my friends in New Zealand? Who are my friends in Australia? Like who's in England that I can talk to right now?
Yep, it's definitely made the world. It made the world smaller in a way that has definitely condensed it into this little community. And I just know so many people are afraid to share. Like I was 40 years old before I let anybody read, and like I've been writing for years, and no one can read this. And I went from that to, here's all of my stuff all over the place. Please read these things, give me feedback. Mm-hmm. And that wouldn't have even happened if it wasn't for these online communities where people, they're not gatekeepers. We're all in the same boat. We're all doing these things. We're all in these different stages of the same process. Like you're on 0, you're on 1, you're on 2, you know what I mean? It's like all these different levels. And without that, I feel like I would still probably be like, let's save the cat. I don't know. Like that's what it would be like.
There's no cat in my story. What are you talking about?
Exactly. You guys all know about Save the Cat, right? No, I'm just kidding.
It's so funny because that's what my husband's the one who convinced me to join Threads, and he was like, yeah, it's like Twitter, and maybe you could connect with the writing, some more authors or something. And I was like, yeah, whatever, sure, I guess. But I didn't really think much of it. And now he's like, oh, big author with 2,000 followers, and he's like, I can't find anyone to talk to, and all I see is your feed, because he's friends with me, and he's like, there's too many authors in my feed. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what a whip is. I don't know what an arc is.
It's got figured out, man.
I know. I was like, well, did you want me to explain all this to you? So now he's like, oh yeah, Miss Popularity or Rare.
Well, I don't know. So I started in Instagram and came over to Threads. So I don't know if you guys were similar, but for me, Instagram's like the pretty aesthetic place where you are marketing, but you're not really marketing, but it's like you present yourself in a package. And then Threads is kind of like the dumpster fire in the backyard where we're all like, is this happening? Like, what are we doing? But I love it. You can post whatever you want.
You can definitely be yourself. There's way more F-bombs.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm a dumpster fire on every single. What are you guys talking about?
I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of F-bombs on my Instagram too, so.
Yeah.
Just before Sarah gets into this, you are an anomaly when it comes to social media. How you have the following you have, yes, you.
Me?
No, Sarah, Burton.
No, she's, yeah.
How you have the following you have without, the trolls and shit like that in your DMs, first off.
Well, she might, you don't know.
She doesn't.
Oh, no.
She doesn't. I've talked to her about this.
It's shocking. It's shocking because we have a close friend who she's blown up in just the last few weeks, and she gets multiple DMs, and I'm over here deep throating pens, and nobody's asking me.
I mean, to be fair, that pen video was hot.
Yeah, that was a good video. I was like, "Ooh, she went there." That's
I know.
amazing.
I was like, I don't know what you're doing with that pen, but I don't know what you said because I'm looking at the pen.
I don't even think I had the sound on. I was like, "What is this?"
Anyways, sorry, Sarah, I interrupted you.
No,
Continue.
I mean, but no, like I haven't, I mean, again, except for people being like, hey, can you maybe help me with that? I'm like, for sure, man. That's what I'm here for. But no, I don't know. I'm lucky, I guess. I haven't had people, I've been told I'm intimidating, so apparently I'm chasing away all of like I don't think so. I think I'm like super sweet. And just a nerd.
You
but
come
anyway,
across as like super friendly to me. That's how,
Yeah.
and I'm always like,
like
at first I was like, is this girl genuine? Like, and then I started chatting with you, like when you're like, hey, I'll be your proofreader, and I was like, oh, thank God you saved my freaking ass. Like, I have a date that this book needs out. Thank you. But like we started chatting, and I was like, no, she's totally 100%. This is how she is, and that really comes across. And I think that's probably why your social media is like, everybody wants that friendly, genuine, nice,
glitter,
deep throating pens. That's what we want. Keep it coming.
That's what we want. Yeah, this is the content that we all need.
Did you have any statements?
I don't even know where we were going.
Sorry.
We were discussing community and why it is very good to find as a writer.
Yeah, because I probably would have quit by now. I like threw my book. I mean, literally, I wrote my book in a month last February. I was like, I don't know, whatever. Put it together. It was like, KDP sounds easy. Sure, why not? Put it out there. And then I was like, no. I woke up from whatever. Well, I was manic. Everybody knows I talk about my mental health. I was in an undiagnosed, 6-month manic phase. So I just kind of was like, well, here, we're going to do this. And then I was like, I can do better than this. And I pulled it. And I just told Sarah this morning, I rewrote the entire thing from first person point of view to third person point of view.
Wow.
After that.
I was like,
yeah,
that must have taken such a long time.
That is an undertaking.
It is.
Yeah, so I did that, and then I stumbled onto Threads in September, and I was like, oh, because I had it since June, and I was like, I don't really understand this. I was never on Twitter either. I'm like, I don't get it. Like, what are we doing here? And then I stumbled back in, and I just was like, oh, well, I can chat with people. Mm-hmm. Sarah's book was the first one on my list of I'm going to read this because and she did, because she's like, it's about it's got 90s references and there's inks and it's sexy. And I'm like, damn girl. All right. You got me sold. It was the first one on my list. And then I made a point, everybody that I kind of put on my list, I've made a point to stay in touch, and try to be hey, I did read your book. I said I was going to, and I did. And this is what I think. And love it. But yeah, you need it. I don't know. People out there thinking that we're competition or trying to just go on their own. I'm sorry. I feel really bad for you. Come join us. We
all
need help.
What reader has ever picked up a book and loved it and then been like, I am never reading another book like this ever again?
Yeah.
That's why I'm like, we're not really competition. Pair up with the other authors.
No, and that's how I find books. I'm like, I read this person's book and then I read their entire backlog, and what can I read to get out of this hangover, because there's no more.
Yeah.
So then I take recommendations, based on that. I'm like, oh, well, if this person's book is like this, well, I'm going to read that too, because I'm chasing it's like I'm chasing a high, like I'm some sort of addict.
Well, you are. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean,
an addict of words.
Really, that's kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay, so we are coming up near the end. I have a list of assumptions here that we're going to go over. So the first assumption is, when it comes to romance novels, gratuitousness. Assumption that sex scenes in romance novels are always gratuitous and inserted purely for shock value or titillation rather than serving a meaningful purpose in the narrative.
There's no way, because I do not write gratuitous, if you will. I say explicit sex scenes. They're almost always entirely emotionally based. And I think I've had people tell me that I say so much by saying so little.
I have a similar thing where I also, all my sex scenes have a purpose. They have some sort of emotional tag to them. However, I have read books that are there for the shock value, and I mean they're just as awesome. So
It's true.
I don't know, man. I
You're like, it's all shock. No,
no. Like so if you're like, when my debut, it's the sweetest fucking book you're ever gonna read.
I keep waiting for more dick. I haven't seen any dick in your book.
No. Jerry Trail doesn't count in this conversation because it's not at all. We'll talk about Nora later.
So my second book, I wouldn't say that I still feel, and Chris can correct me if I'm wrong, I still feel like every sex scene is there for a purpose. There's a deep connection. They do have a purpose in the story. Are some of them a little bit more like, yeah, damn bitch, like we're gonna go there? 100%.
The last one that you added, maybe
Which
not
one?
as much. The one at the end.
In the epilogue, that's 100% needed.
We're moving on. We're moving on.
She will defend that gun.
But yeah, okay. So, Sarah, sometimes unrealistic expectations. The idea that sex in romance and relationships is completely unrealistic and an idealized portrayal of intimacy, creating unattainable expectations for real life relationships.
I mean, maybe you're just in the wrong relationship. Sorry, that was a burn.
Facts. No, that was facts. That was facts.
But I mean, to some extent, sure. But like, everyone's living in a fantasy. Like when you watch, I want to go on a quest and throw a ring in a mountain. Like, it's a fantasy world. Like, read what you want, and it's not necessarily, the expectation isn't that it's going to be your real life. It never has been. And that's not why I read.
we read to escape.
Yeah.
Like if I want, well, I love my husband. He's upstairs. But if I wanted average dick in my books, I mean, I have that, right? I need better than that. No, I'm just kidding. I love you. You can't hear me, but no.
I'll put a disclaimer up right here. It's fine.
But no, like you read for an escape. So if it's potentially crazy, then it is. I don't know.
Well, and I mean, that's why people watch porn, right? Like, they don't watch it because that's what they do in real life. They watch it because like, what's that like?
Exactly.
I mean, I like to take notes to see if I'm doing it. But
I need that, actually. I'm like, I don't know how to.
My favorite is when people are like, so is this like based on your life? And I'm like,
that was the next one. That was the next one right there.
I literally had somebody like preposition me and my husband for like a throuple, and I was like, well, we're not really into that, but just because my book has that.
I mean, I do write from experience, and I have brought up the topic of, I'm like, if one of my exes were to read this, would they know?
Fair enough, yeah.
Like, would they know it was them? Like, would they be like, oh, damn, she remembered that, man? And I'd be like, yeah, dude, it's all up here, locked in, because you're going to be in a book one day. Just wait.
Don't piss her off.
No, I mean, hopefully I'm writing something good. Like, hopefully, like, yeah, I mean, one way or the, like, well, I don't want to just say, like, hopefully, like, the dick was good, because I've had other things too, but make it memorable, and then you'll get to be in a book one day.
Yeah.
So that is kind of the next question: is every sex scene you write is based on something you have done? And I think we covered that for the most part. Between that one. Objectification of the characters, particularly female protagonists, reducing them to mere objects of desire.
I think as long as your character is realistic, it doesn't matter if they're a damsel in distress or not, because sometimes we need help and sometimes we don't. So like, that's how I wrote my characters. Like, sometimes, yeah, the guys are, touch her and die. And sometimes she's like, I don't need your fucking help. Like, I can do it myself. So I think it's, as long as the character is realistic, that it doesn't really matter what the expectation is.
I agree. I definitely agree. I've gotten yelled at for objectification the other way. My husband,
Oh, totally. Yeah. I'm like,
yeah, he read my book the first time. He was like, you have made this one character way too perfect. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, he kind of is. So are you jealous? Like, that was kind of where I went with it. And then
and there's nothing wrong with portraying like realistic body standards, like for sure.
Exactly.
Like in my second book, like the guy used to be a hockey player and he's was forced to leave the sport, and now he's softer in certain places, and like I'm happy to portray that. But you know, I mean, he's still your hero and your heroine. Like to some extent, they're an idealized version of who you want to be or who you want to be with. You know,
I've gotten yelled at because all my men are trees that you're just gonna like rip the bark off.
Fair enough.
I mean, rip the bark off with the teeth, right? Or sorry.
But I was gonna say, because I mean, and Chris kind of dropped her name. My Nora character, she's like fierce, and I've had people be like, dude, I mean, somebody actually, they're like, I wish I could be her, and I'm like, well, I mean, you probably are just a little bit. Like, you just gotta like find that. But like, it's about like, she's a well-rounded character, and I'm like, and it's normal. And like you said, like if your character is true to like, I don't know, it fits. I'm like, I don't really think it matters. I have like one character who's almost so perfect that you just want to like punch him in the face. But then I have characters that are so fucking gray, but they're gray from the minute you meet them until the minute that the book's over. And I'm like, as long as you stay true to that, I don't think the rest of it matters. Like,
well, most of my guys are really effed in the head. So, I mean, they're not perfect. What can I say? They might look perfect, but dang, like they got some mental problems.
But they're so hot, man. They're my book boyfriends.
Okay, so this next one, I'm pretty sure doesn't actually apply to any of you, but you know, it sounds good. Lack of depth, assumption that the romance writers produce shallow, formulaic stories lacking depth or substance.
I mean, I don't even think I've read a novella that's lacking depth, honestly. Like, there are so many fucking talented romance writers out there. And to be honest, I'm not calling anyone out. But like the popular romance writers, and I don't even consider Colleen Hoover to be romance per se, but just books like that, I feel like those are more shallow than some of the indie writers I've read, or more formulaic, and that may or may not be their fault. That may be because they're traditionally published and this is what sells, and so they're doing it. But I mean, in a lot of ways, like I think that romance has more depth than a lot of other traditionally published genres.
Yeah, I know from a romanticy standpoint, there's a lot of themes that people explore in really unique ways that I never like. One of the ones that I've tried in my own is more of like a PTSD kind of, which I know that's probably in a lot of books, but like seeing that in fantasy is kind of a weird. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what I mean. But I think that there's more depth in romance books in general, because you're not just getting like a story, you're also getting these relationships and how they're building together or apart, or how, you know what I mean, however it's happening. So it's, instead of just like a guy going to work and then coming home from work and then having dinner, and you know what I mean, like there's more to it than just that. You're seeing, and I also agree that like traditional versus indie, I wonder if it is the expectation or their editor that's saying, hey, it needs to fit these tropes or these boxes. But indie definitely has a much larger scale of depth to them, for sure.
That'll bring us into the next one there. All romance novels are overly, the wording we're talking about earlier when it came to like engorged members and things like that. That is in all books, and go for it.
I mean,
Talk
I know
to me about words, about penises.
I know, you know, romance writers. I can think of one in particular who loves his purple prose, and that's like his thing, and he's very good at it. And if that's your thing, like, read his books. But you know, there's only so much there's not that many variations on dick and cock, like, to be honest. So and if they are, like, can you take them seriously? Like, I want people to take my sex scenes somewhat seriously. So yeah, we're not having, engorged members, things like that. I think most romance writers try to avoid flowery language like that.
So I will say, because my suitor book, I tried to stay true to the characters. Like in the male's point of view, he's a little bit like more like he'll, when he's talking, you're going to, he's going to say certain things. Now, my girl, like, she's just so cute and just sweet. And so, like, I kind of tried to formulate, like, how would they actually talk about these things? And those are, like, the terms that I'm going to use. So, like, those books are really, like, sweet. Now, my next book, like, she literally asks him to lick her from her cunt to her asshole. So, like, it's in there, and I don't care. Like, you like it or you don't like it, but hey, that's what people are,
Yeah, and I mean, there are people there's always someone who's going to think a word's gross. Like, there are people's ick words, and they exist, and some people use them, and
Well, and they're all like, different. Yeah, they're all
Well, and I've never gone through, like, and been like, oh, because I thesaurus a lot of words, but I don't really thesaurus any sex words. Like, there's, like, the top, like, 5, and I'm good. Yeah.
I can't do juicing. Like, when somebody's like, her juices were like, like, I'm done. Like, I'm out, man. Don't, like, no.
Okay, now we're going to move into some positive assumptions before we wrap up here. People assume that romance writers are inherently romantic individuals that believe in love and happily ever afters.
No.
I mean,
we got 2 maybes and Sarah just smiling.
I think that it's very possible. I've been married for 17 years, so it's like it's out there. I don't know if it necessarily looks the same.
I think it looks different for everyone, for sure. Like,
Yeah.
I've been married 15 years too, and, like, obviously no one in sight, but I don't consider myself a romantic. I get complaints from my husband all the time. He's like, hug me. Like, he wants me to touch him all the time. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I didn't even, like, I'm just not a toucher. And they're like, you write romance. And I'm like, yeah, but that's just not my personality.
Your love language is something completely different.
Completely
like mine
different.
is like coffee and sushi, and that's it. And then move on. No, I'm just
buy me a cookie. I'm fine.
Right.
But I don't consider myself a romantic. I was when I was a kid. I went through a lot of relationships that kind of ruined it for me before I found what I wanted. And I like the music I listen to. I like stuff that makes me cry. Like, pretty much everything in my life, I prefer to, like, be miserable except for romance, which I write. So I don't understand why, but I don't consider myself very romantic. We ignore Valentine's Day. We rarely remember our anniversary, whatever.
I'm kind of, I guess, like, middle of the road. I don't, like, I fucking hate Valentine's Day. Don't buy me a card. Don't give me flowers. They're gonna die. Like, I don't want that shit. Like, no. But, like, am I a fucking horrible, hopeless romantic? Yes. Like, when my friends are like, oh, I just met this guy, and they tell me about him, I'm like,
oh, to be fair, I am a romantic for other people. Totally.
Yes.
Yeah, like, and that's where I'm like, I think all my characters are gonna, like, I shouldn't say that, because, like, I do put them through, like, hell and back, but I'm just kind of, like, I don't know. I want everybody to be happy, but I guess to the point of, like, happiness is different for everybody. Like, yeah, I mean, my friend right now is, like, totally teaching me about, just being in a poly relationship and what are they called? So ethically non-monogamous relationships. And I'm like, please tell me more. Please educate me. Like, I want to know. And if that's what works for you, like, she's the happiest she's probably been in, like, 10 years. And I'm like, this is fucking great, man. Like, yes, do you. And if that, like, I don't know. So yeah.
I think that would be, maybe we're romantics in the sense that we want other people to experience that, and so we're writing these stories of that so that they can experience it, even if they're not necessarily in love themselves. Because, like, I have a lot of my friends are, like, 10 years younger than me, or 15, 20 years younger than me. And I live vicariously through their dating relationships. I'm like, oh, what are you guys doing tonight? Like, what? Yeah, show me all these guys that you're swiping on. Let's talk about. And they're just like, you're the old married lady. Come on. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but like, I need some of this too.
So that actually goes quite nice into the next assumption, which is romance writers possess a deep understanding of human emotion and relationships, making them very empathic storytellers.
I think maybe to a certain... I think in order to write realistic characters, you have to be that way somewhat. Maybe not necessarily for everything all the time, but I don't know. Empathy in general is important. Mm-hmm. Just as human beings. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a hard one.
Yeah, it is. And for being someone who I don't consider myself romantic, but at the same time, I've been in love so many times. Like with people who, like even platonic love, like it's like, you're just, it's such a, I don't know the word. I can't think of the word right now, but it's such a spectrum as to like how, like, it's almost like the queer spectrum. Like you're kind of in love with her and you're kind of in love with him. And there's different levels of that. And I feel that like very strongly for a lot of people all the time. And so like, if I wasn't if my husband wasn't a secure person, he would probably think I was cheating on him like 24/7 because flirting is my personality. And so, I think that to some extent that helps me with writing for sure, because I write like everyone is in love with everyone. And that's how I ended up with a bisexual character. Cause I was like, these two are best friends. What if they were more? Like, what would that be like? And that's just led that way. So I think it helps.
100%.
Yeah, I like that.
I'm just an empath, like in general. And so I feel like it's like unavoidable to not like, I don't know. But yeah, to Sarah's point, I fall in love with everybody. Like, like, I mean, yeah, like platonic, like, but yes, like the amount of people that I've like loved in my life, I'm just like, you guys are so cute and you just make my heart so smooth.
I like that, the concept of platonic. Like, I feel like there isn't enough of that in our stories too. Like how many, well, and to your point about if your husband wasn't confident, you would think you were cheating. Same, because like I have good friends. I have a friend from work that I've worked with him for 14 years and we're goofy. And like if no one knew who we were and knew that like we had a brother-sister relationship, they would probably think that we were having an affair because that's just the way we act around each other. But that's a platonic, like I love that guy like he's my brother. Like he needs to be in my life all the time. But yeah, I like to love everybody equally.
Yeah, I mean, me and my one best friend, we've been friends since 7th grade, and our relationship has evolved a lot over the years. And my husband will always joke, he's like, you guys are practically like, I mean, and yeah, you would think, I mean, we're so in sync. And like, she's the one who's like dating right now. And she's like, how do I look in this lingerie? And she's like sending me dirty pictures. And my husband's like, nah, it's, whatever. Like, I know how you two are. But yeah, a lot of people would be like, oh, there's totally, and the problem with, we don't probably have time to go into this, but that's like the problem to me in the world right now is that everybody's like, well, people can't be friends. Like, there means that there's something there. I'm like, no, it doesn't mean that there's something. Like, it means we're best friends and I love her, but it doesn't mean like I'm cheating on my husband. So
yeah, it's kind of like the stigma where it's like, oh, well, how can you write queer books? And I'm like, well, who says I'm not queer? Like, just because I'm married to a guy? Like,
yeah.
So that's like that whole thing about, bisexuality being invisible for the most part, because you can't really tell that someone is unless they tell you that they are.
Well, now it sounds like we're getting into round 2 of an entirely different topic.
Sorry about that.
So we'll save that for part 2.
Host this a second time.
There's going to be so many of these. I got so many of these planned, man. You have no idea. So, okay, as we go to wrap it up now, because we're just about to hit the 1 hour 30-minute mark. Is there anything about the romance genre and being a writer in there that you really want people outside of it to know and go, hey, this is who I am, this is why I do this, it has nothing to do with this, just whatever bugs you when it comes to people's assumptions about you?
I don't rate Hallmark books. Like
That's
that, like I'll say, oh, I'm a romance writer, and then they'll be like, oh, it doesn't seem like your personality to be a romance. And I'm like, no, it's not the type of romance that I write. But there's a lot of assumption outside of the romance community. I think that romance is what they see on Hallmark or Lifetime or, whatever Christmas movie is coming out, and, whatever rom-com was around in the 90s. And I love 90s rom-coms. Like, seriously, I grew up on things like 10 Things I Hate About You and, When Harry Met Sally and all those rom-coms. But, like, that's not what I write, and that's not all that romance is.
I agree with that statement. And that's kind of where, my first book, I feel like, is that 90s rom-com. And then,
that's why I like your first book. 100%.
And then everything that comes after that is, I've gotten yelled at by quite a few people that have beta read for me. And it's not a Hallmark. It's not going to necessarily give you all the feels at all the times. And I also think that romance novels are a really good way to address other topics, because we're talking about human connection, and we're talking about how going into mental health, like I address that really deep in my stuff. And it's like that impacts relationships, not just yours, but like your relationships with your family, your friends, your partners so much. And we can really put that into books. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that just think, yeah, they're these like fluffy, frilly, and they're not. And I think romance is the perfect genre to incorporate that into.
And even books that are advertised as like cozy, like they still have mental health rep. They still have angst. They still have the third act breakup that's going to like crush you. Like they're not all, sunshine and rainbows. And I've no doubt that there are perfectly good books out there that are like that, but certainly the majority that I've read are not.
Yeah, and I just hide behind sword fights and lots of blood and magic. So,
some people like that sort of thing. Mafia I don't like Mafia dark romance very much. There's very few Mafia books that I've read and liked, but man, they're bloody. Like, there's lots of blood. They get their happy ever after, but they go through it.
I think I need to pick some of these up. That's what I think.
Oh, yeah.
So before we go and wrap it up, I haven't chimed in much because this has been all about you. But I just wanted to say that from my perspective coming into this, I'm a horror, sci-fi, suspense, terror guy. That's what I've always been. I didn't actually read a romance novel until I offered to read Cherry Trail way back in the day for Sarah here, and fell in love with the entire concept. With Nora first, and then
I was gonna say, you're cheating on your girl, man.
Yeah, no, it started with her second book, and it floored me. It was nothing like I was expecting out of a romance story, and legit, I have photos. It made me cry by the end of the story, like legit full tears. It was interesting for me going into it, not knowing what to expect, but just being open about it and realizing how great romance as a genre is. And I think that's what a lot of people need to get their mindset out of, is the cliched term romance, when it's, it exists, but the majority of them are actually just real life in different situations with graphic sex. And
sword fighting.
And sword fighting. And
fighting in my book.
Depends on the sword.
Sword fighting.
The swords.
Different swords.
So that's what I would chime into that whole thing. But okay, so to wrap this up, we're going to do a once more around the table, starting with Burton, and just give yourself your name, where to find you, and what you have coming up or released.
Okay, so Sarah again. You can find me on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, And it's just, my handle's Sara Burton _writes. And I have my debut novel, Cherry Trail, Story From Havenburg, releasing on May 24th. I'm super excited about that. And then hopefully book 2 on a different series will be coming out in August or September. So
I'm Ciara Hartford. You can find me on Instagram and Threads under _Zeffy, because I'm weird and don't follow any rules, or _Zeffy on TikTok. And I just released The House of Starling. And I'm hoping to have book 2 out later this year if I can line up editors and get my crap together. Yeah, I'm looking at you.
And I'm Sara Elisabeth, and that's Sara, no H, Elizabeth with an S. And my debut, Someday Away, which came out in January. It's on ebook, paperback, Kindle Unlimited, and my handles on social media are Sara Elisabeth Author. So you can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Instagram, and certainly you can find me on Threads, where I'm way more interesting. So, and I'm working on book 2, it's a character series, so you can read book 1 separately, but always recommended to read book 1 first. So.
Read it.
All right. Well, dear listeners, that brings us to the end of the first Dripping Creativity Romance Roundtable discussion. I want to extend a sincere gratitude to all of you for joining me here at the table. It has been a freaking amazing blast, and I want to do this again for another 6 hours. We can cover so many other things, and it's so great. To everyone else, we hope you are inspired by the depth and passion shared in today's conversation. Remember, creativity knows no bounds, so let your imagination run wild and keep dripping with creativity. My name is Chris Corvan. You can find me everywhere at Chris of the Void. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.